Thank you for joining the podcast for Beyond the Banter. Before we get started, you need to know some important information. If you need support immediately, please reach out to one of the following organisations. Lifeline on 131114, Beyond Blue on 1300224636, or Men's Line Australia on 1300 789 978. If your life is in danger, please call 000 immediately.
Beyond the banter, beyond the banter, we'll find the answer. Beyond the banter, beyond the banter.
G'day everyone, here we are at what's going to be episode 8 in this podcast series for season 1. We've got an incredible podcast, I think, for today, one that I'm certainly really passionate about and very well connected with. I can't wait to get into this one, but as I've said before hitting record, I'm not sure how I'm going to get through this one, but we'll see how we go. And it's certainly one that's very connected to me. So today we're going to be talking to Red Nose. So on the 25th of March, there is Say Their Name Day, which is all about making sure we recognise the babies that have been lost and passed away, and allowing parents that space to make sure that it's okay, that they know that it's okay to say their name. One thing in my journey, and through the podcast, I've obviously talked about it a number of times. One of the things that helped me through it was my support network and how they all allowed me to make sure that Caden, my son, was not an elephant in the room, and it was something that they were able to talk about and ask questions about and be part of that life and acknowledge that he existed. And I think it's really important that we continue that. So Red Nose is on board with that and obviously driving that mandate. And they're also growing their space in the men's health around fathers that have lost their babies as well through SIDS and through other miscarriage, stillbirth. Mine was an infant loss, so it's been really helpful for me, and one that I still volunteer with, and I've volunteered for a while now, so it's been really helpful being in that space as well. Chris, I'm not sure if you've got anything you want to add briefly.
Yeah, sure. Just from the moment we started talking about coming up with this podcast and the idea and the concept behind it, I didn't even really have to get a sentence out before Topher said Red Nose Australia, and I was like, yep, no problems at all. And what we've managed to do is carry his story throughout the whole podcast and everything else we do around it to make sure that it's important that we're remembering not only Caden, but the experience that Chris has gone through, and in an effort to try and help the next person. So we feel that we've done a pretty good job so far, but having you both on the show today is going to take it to another level. And when we decided to do this and take this on, we knew that they were going to be tough conversations, and we knew that it was going to get full on. So we just want to give the viewers a little bit of a heads up that this episode could be a bit triggering for some around infant loss, and if it is, please make sure if you do listen to it, go out and get the support you need and reach out to those that love you. But that's really about it for me.
But I'm super excited. We've got Karen here from Red Nose, who's going to give us a bit of a spiel on what Red Nose do and how they are supporting and growing that men's support, and a bit about Say Their Name Day, which I can't wait to push this one out. So Karen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you both so much for having me on. And, I just want to echo what's already been said, that some of this discussion may be triggering for people, and just to let people know that they can reach out to Red Nose 24/7 on 1300 308 307, and there'll always be someone on the other end of the phone to take that call. But I guess a little bit about Red Nose. So Red Nose is an organisation that provides free bereavement support to anyone impacted by the death of a baby or child for any reason, and that's miscarriage all the way through to the death of an older child. We provide that support in a range of ways. So it can be through peer support, so someone with lived experience who will support a newly bereaved person on their journey, also through professional counsellors, through a mixture of those two, through support groups, both face to face and online, and in community events where we bring families together. Because what we know about grief is that families so often feel alone and that they're the only ones who know this feeling. And we talk a lot about the club that no one ever wants to join. But once they have joined, our main priority is to make sure that that sense of isolation is gone and that there is always somewhere that they know that they can come to for that support. So what we hear, so often from the men who reach out to us for support is that it's a really, really tricky space. That so much of the attention after the death of a baby or child is on mum and how mum is coping, and that dads report so often being asked, how's your partner going, rather than how are they going, and that really exacerbates the problem that men feel like they have to be the ones to hold it all together, that they're the ones who need to be able to fix it, to make it okay. And we hear from so many men that, for the first year or so after the death of a baby or child, they do that role. And then they wonder why at, a year down the track, they're starting to feel like they're not coping when the other people in their lives are starting to feel like they are. So we spend a lot of time talking about what men can and need to do for themselves, and the sort of support that men want. We always laugh, mention the word support group to men, and they'll run as far as they can. But mention the opportunity to come to a workshop or to talk to other dads about strategies. All of a sudden, there's some interest there. So we find that in the support being offered at Red Nose, where we talk about, we have these ways to be okay forums, and we see a lot of couples come on to those forums where we give strategies about how to cope with different aspects of grief. We also have a dedicated men's line, so that is run and supported by men, and we do men's support groups. But we're also, I say that, we often will call it something else other than support group. But we will continue to work really, really hard to make sure that men, A, know that they can't fix it. Because I think if men know that they can't fix it, it takes the pressure off trying to fix it. Whereas what men really just need to know is they just need to be present. They need to be able to sit, and hold that space for their partner, but also to give themselves permission to sit in that space themselves and to kind of go, wow, this hurts. I never thought that in my life that I was going to experience pain like this, and acknowledge that they probably don't have the skills and strategies um, to deal with it. And then, having the confidence, I guess, to reach out, and whether it's to an organization like Red Nose or whether it's just to a mate or a family member to say, hey, I'm struggling. And Mike was part of an initiative that we did last year, which was our Fathers of Loss videos. And we interviewed a number of dads about what the experience has been like for them. That now sits on the Red Nose website. So even if dads don't want to publicly be front facing in support, they can go onto the site and they can hear from other dads what their experience has been, because we also know how individual grief is, and no two dads are going to do it the same way. We just want them to know that what they are experiencing is normal.
Yeah, it's really important. It's really important. I actually, because my experience is obviously going through it with Topher. So from my point of view, it's about being a mate and how I can support that person going through it, and know what to say and know what to do in certain circumstances, and understanding and realizing that you have to let the parent grieve, you have to let them go through that process, and that may take as long as it needs to take, but you have to let them go through that. So, me personally, I've learned a lot going through it, looking after Topher when sadly it happened 9 years ago for him. So, I think it's really important that we're talking about it. I love the idea of being able to watch it in your own time and not have that pressure of that scary word support for a man. I mean, God, I'm shaking, but it is very confronting and it is very full on, and that's where I think the hesitancy sort of comes from. So
And I think as well, you mentioned, being prepared to sit in it. I think that's part of why there is so much stigma attached to baby and child loss, that it is sad beyond sad, and no one feels like they've got, the expertise in how do I make sure I say the right thing? And I'm so scared about saying the wrong thing that I'll say nothing at all. Whereas, if we could say to just dads and men out there, if you say, I don't know what to say, but I'm here, that means everything, right? It's not about coming up with that brilliant one-liner that we think is going to take away the pain. It's about committing to sitting in the discomfort, to getting comfortable in the mud, and being there without the expectation that next week, their mate's going to be better. We know that people don't get over grief. What we do know is that they learn to integrate it, so that they're able to continue functioning in a way that's meaningful for them. But that's really reliant on having that support network that allows them to talk about their baby or child. And that's why Say Their Name Day is so important.
Karen, just one of the reasons why when Chris pitched this to me in the car on one of our drives, one of the reasons I jumped at it pretty quickly was around men's mental health typically, but obviously grief ties into that so tightly. One of the things I've experienced through volunteering in a couple of different organisations now is that you'll get that registration run sheet of 15 names, and then when you actually start the session, you'll have 4 or 5 blokes on there. And I still think there's a stigma where men are still not ready to join these forums as openly as possibly women. And I know you have much more data on that than Chris and I do. But can you explain a little bit of that about why men are still so reluctant to jump on and talk about that stuff?
Well, I think if we look at societies, I think we've come a really long way in acknowledging, that men are allowed to have feelings and emotions, but we've still got a long way to go. And I think women almost naturally sit in their vulnerability in a more comfortable way than what men do. And for a whole lot of reasons, whether it's family background, whether it's culture, whether it's religion, whether it's personality type, men need to be given permission to be vulnerable and to feel safe to be vulnerable. And we're constantly looking at ways that we can do that. Is it better to get a group of men out there hiking together? And, if they happen to start talking, fantastic, but they all know why they're there. Are they better doing stuff? If we run a call for volunteers of men to help us with anything, we'll get them. If it means doing something, men, for the most part, are more comfortable. But what we want to make sure we're doing all of the time is giving them permission to do the feeling and the thinking and not the expectation of the doing. And I think it's a slow process. I think that taking the pressure off by really reiterating that they, as I said before, that they can't fix it, but their grief matters too, and their mental health is super important. And for them to be able to support their loved ones, there's got to be something in their tank. And how do we make sure that men's tanks are full or full enough, as well? We also, I mean, we talk about this a lot about, the number of registrations and then the number of people who are actually there. I think what's interesting is where we do recordings of forums, etc. I wonder how many of those men watch them quietly on their own, as opposed to being, the one publicly there. So I wouldn't be completely, you know, disenchanted or disillusioned by the lack of actually turning up. It's interesting. We find that if we pivot or pitch it in a way that, come to support your partner, we're more likely to get them in. But when we then have men in the room, it's okay, guys, right? This is what we want each and every one of you to know. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to not know what to do or say, to help your partner, your other children, whoever it might be. It's okay for you to be vulnerable. And it's interesting when you watch men's faces when you give them permission and their body language, something just kind of you see an almost an energetic melt. But I think societally we have to work hard to really break the taboo and the stigma around, men being sooky, like it's so harsh and so unhelpful. And you're 100% right, puts men at increased risk of mental health comorbidities.
Well, Karen, I could probably ask a billion questions, to be honest, because I think having your expertise on here would end up in a podcast on its own. Uh, but I guess, is there something specific that you want to mention to men and women that we haven't asked of you this afternoon, or is there something that you just want to make sure that you've covered
Well,
off?
I think if we just cover off on say their name day, which I can probably do in 3 sentences. Um, So, given everything that we've talked about with the taboo and the stigma around baby and child death, that's why Say Their Name Day is so important, because what we hear from families day in, day out is how much they miss hearing their baby or child's name. So this will be our fifth Say Their Name Day. It grows every year, and it really is the opportunity that as a community we come together and say we remember. And whether it's a name, whether it's a nickname, whether it's just a baby and a surname, that we acknowledge that these precious little babies and children are missed and are part of the everyday lives still of the grieving parents.
Well said.
Absolutely.
Well said.
That's why we got you on, because I couldn't have said it that well.
All right. Well, look, as we mentioned before, we really appreciate you coming on, Karen. And you know, when we started this idea, we didn't think that we would get the kind of exposure that we have. And I know Kofi's got some audio issues at the moment, but I know that he was very humbled to have you on here today. And to be honest, we just can't wait to do more with Red Nose. We're really excited, and yeah, we can't wait to see where the future goes with that. So we want to thank you both for your time. And I'm sure this won't be the last time that we have a chat on this platform. We'll mention the telephone number, the 24/7 number throughout the podcast as well. We'll make sure we add that to the notes, and with some stuff around Say Your Name as well. Say the name name.
Thanks, guys, so much. And before I jump off, Mike, good luck, and thank you also for your constant advocacy for men in this space. And I know how much energy and bravery and courage it takes to share the story. It never gets easier. So just, I guess, want to acknowledge, all of our very special little ones that aren't with us today, and the reasons why we're doing this. So I just wanted to do a shout out to both of you and to Mike as well.
He's in safe hands. He's in safe hands. Thank you, Karen. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. See you guys. Thanks. Okay. All right.
See you
Bye.
later. Bye bye. All right, awesome. That's so good to have the CEO of Red Nose to come on and have a chat to us, and it intros nicely into what Topher's trying to do with this podcast and platform to promote men speaking up and sharing their experiences in the effort to prevent suicide and prevention of suicide due to mental health and associated diagnosis with mental health. So that is awesome, and we really appreciate Karen coming on and having a chat. Mike, welcome. I know we did the welcomes at the start, but welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
The podcast is really designed for men like yourself that have unfortunately gone through some traumatic events in their life. It's a platform really to educate the next person. In this case, would be the listeners. That if they have experienced something and they, haven't taken the right measures, hopefully your story will be able to help them to be able to get some comfort and take the appropriate measures to speak out and get support and end the stigma and all the stuff that goes with it. So, from Topher and myself, we're very humbled that you're giving us a chance to come on and have a chat. At any stage throughout the chat, mate, if you want to take a break or anything like that, you just tell us and we'll cut it out of the podcast. This is all about how much you want to give, and you're in safe hands. Me and Topher, looking forward to hearing your story. And in saying that, Topher, I don't know if there's anything you want to add before we kick off with Mike's story.
As everyone has said to you, Mike, and I've said to you, I think I said it in text, I really appreciate you jumping on, and I've read your article, and I'm looking forward to the chat. And I'm sorry that we're both having to have these conversations, but
it's
let's make sure that there's awareness out there that these are real,
absolutely.
and there we go.
Excellent.
All right, Mike, over to yourself.
All right. So, as you know, I'm Mike. My wife is Lauren. We had years of infertility issues or fertility issues. So we tried to have a baby sort of for about 5 years. Lauren had several miscarriages along the way, both when we were doing IVF and we actually fell pregnant naturally and miscarried as well. She also had an ectopic pregnancy, and I had to rush her to emergency surgery one night. So we went through quite a bit. And then on the 21st of May in 2020, we had our beautiful girl, Hope Aloma. It was conceived through IVF, and she was absolutely perfect, stunning little girl. And everything was going fine. She was putting on weight, she was feeding well. And on the 10th of June, 2020, and we both distinctly remember at 6:37 a.m. we woke up and we found out, and she was an awful colour in her bassinet. She had passed away. We weren't sure how long ago. So we rang the ambulance. I started doing CPR on her, basic life support until the ambulance got there, which seemed like, I don't know, an eternity, but they turned up in 4 minutes apparently. So, and they worked on our little girl for about 40 minutes until there was an emergency doctor that arrived. They actually flew in on a helicopter and landed on a field nearby. And he came and said, look, I'm sorry to say, unfortunately, your little girl is now deceased. And they're words that I never forget. And then our world came crashing down, obviously. It was an extremely traumatic morning. My mother-in-law, Lauren's mum, was living with us at the time, so she witnessed all this as well. Her little granddaughter passing away like this. It's sort of one of those things that you can't prepare yourself for it. And you don't really know what to do or say. Lauren and I had both been under care of psychologists and psychiatrists prior to this with depression and anxiety, so we were quite well connected. And that day that Hope passed away, we actually admitted ourselves to Belmont Private Hospital in Brisbane, which is a psychiatric hospital. Just so we could we just couldn't stay in our house. At that time, we were distraught, and we really didn't know where to start with anything. At the time we were thinking about, preparing for a christening and who we'd invite, and then the next thing we're planning a funeral. But on the actual day, we were extremely lucky. We had some really, really empathetic police that turned up, because, as you know, every death in the home, you have to have police there. Of course, we had child protection detectives there as well, so everybody interviewed us together individually, etc., and they were extremely respectful and very empathetic and very, very caring. and we got to hold our little hope for as long as we could. The police kept sending away the people from the funeral home saying, no, go and have another coffee. They're not ready. So, but then after that, that's when we got in contact with the police had already rung our psychiatrist and told them what happened, and so we went and got an admission there. So we were there for 10 days, which gave us some room to grieve. It gave us some room to plan her funeral. It gave us some room and some time to contact people and let them know what happened, because we had a lot of supporters that knew what we'd gone through with our fertility issues, and so everyone was equally sort of distraught. So that was the day, and the next sort of few weeks were a bit of a blur. We had her funeral, and we tried to make that as beautiful as we could, give her a send off, a little angel, and then after that we didn't really know what to do with ourselves. Lauren was still on maternity leave, obviously. I was only in a casual job at the time, so I sort of just called them and said I'm not going to be in for a while. And then we'd always thought about going up to Port Douglas because we used to go there a bit and take Hope up there. When she was a few weeks old enough to sort of travel, and so we thought, well, maybe we should go up there. And then we thought, oh, we're just going to end up sitting up there drinking ourselves stupid as well, like we're doing at home, because because you don't really know what to do. So you drink too much wine, you listen to too many sad songs, and you go to bed, you get up, you might shower, you might not, you just feel like crap. So anyway, we decided, well, maybe rather than do that, maybe we should go for a bit of a road trip. It was right in the middle of COVID. Queensland, everything was shut down. The borders were shut, so you could go over the border, but you couldn't come back. So we thought we'd do a road trip in Queensland. So in about 72 hours, we planned our trip, which ended up being about 30 days long, and got the car serviced, new tyres, all that sort of thing. And then within a week, we headed off, and that was really the start of our healing journey. Because we got to experience a lot of really good things. We felt our little girl around us a lot, and we met a lot of people that had gone through a lot of things, and they were going through a lot of things, and then we didn't feel so alone. We sort of felt like there's other people out there that are hurting. They've all got different stories. They might not have lost a child, but we met one couple, and this lady, she was stage 4 cancer, and she knew she was going to die, but they were out there making the most of it. And we met some other people who one lady whose grandchild had run up to jump on his dad's ride-on mower and slipped and gone under and lost his leg. So there was all these things that people were carrying and felt comfortable talking to us about because we shared a bit about our story. So
Can I ask though? I mean, obviously you were comfortable to share your story with those people while you're traveling. Was that an important part for you in that journey? Was that you wanted to make sure that you spoke about it?
Yeah, it was really important. Before we left too, I should go back to that. We actually set up a little Facebook page called the Hobaloma Memorial Road Trip. So we had about 100 people following us on that. So it was a bit of a blog, vlog sort of a thing for us, which was really important. There was some fairly deep conversations around, sitting around a fire and talking about her, and some very funny jovial moments along the way. And but yeah, that was really important as part of our healing, I think, was to talk about what had happened, because and we knew that we wanted a child, we wanted a couple of children, and we're not young, so we sort of had to get to a stage where we were going to be ready again, and rush ourselves. It probably would have been different if we'd been in our late 20s or early 30s, but I was in my late 40s and Lauren late 30s or 40. So it was very important for us to start our healing as quick as possible. But yeah, absolutely, talking to other people really helped along the way. Yeah.
Can I, and I hope you're okay to talk about it. You've shared a couple of things there. And I lost my son 9.5 years ago.
Yeah.
He was 2 months old, not through SIDS, but he had during labour, he had oxygen deprivation, which caused damage on the brain. And then over the next couple of months, he deteriorated. But one thing I noted was when I read your article and what you said there around the police being there and child protection services, when I rang the paediatrician and said, look, my son's blue, but he's breathing, he actually told me not to ring the ambulance because police would turn up.
Really?
And because he had been the treating doctor, he said he could support me through it virtually. And he actually did that for me. But I remember that moment where he said, your son's going to die today. And I can't imagine what it would have been like dealing with that and having police and protective service detectives in your house at the same time. Can you share that with us as well? I mean, what's that like?
Yeah, well, it was pretty daunting. We had so we live at Wynnum in Brisbane, and we had the guy, whoever was the highest ranking officer that day, came out. Obviously, the ambulance notified, and he came out first, and he said, look, I'm so sorry, what's happened? He said, I've got a couple of guys, got my two best guys coming, and they were just very, very, very good to us. It was sort of like one guy took Lauren and one guy took me, but they were just very respectful. They said, who can we call, who can we contact, what can we do for you, basically, where can we take you, all those sort of things. And they basically, when the child protection or the child protection unit turned up, the detectives, they went out. They had a little powwow on our back veranda, and basically they came in and said, look, this is not a wrongful death or homicide investigation. We just have to get all the facts. It's very uncomfortable and awkward that we have to ask you this. We have to prepare everything for the coroner, so we have to ask this. I'm really, really sorry, But yeah, and look, we were very lucky. I've heard some horror stories from other people where it's been really, really confronting, the way they've been dealt with. So I think we were just extremely fortunate that day, and we have some really nice police in our area. Yeah.
They could obviously identify that there wasn't an issue pretty early, and could support you through it rather than, but even having to answer questions when you're trying to process the fact that your child's just died. I mean, that must be incredibly hard.
It's really, really difficult. It's really, really difficult because it's very surreal, because you're sort of thinking, I don't even know if this is just a really bad dream or what's going on. But it was sort of just, we just had to get through it, basically. Yeah, but they supported us a lot through that, so.
That's good to hear. Good to hear.
I've spoken to Topher. Just so you know, I've known Topher close to 30 years, so we've grown up together. I know that still plays on Topher's head, that part about the police coming to the house, because he's brought it up with me several times. So I know that plays a big part. And I think, Topher, you still sit there and think, what if the police did come that day? Would I be able to do it? Would they be accusing me of this or accusing me of that, or asking questions that I just wouldn't be able to answer? So I know that plays on your mind quite a bit, Topher, throughout the sessions.
Well, no one tells you, right? So until that happens, like, I didn't know. So I was literally about to press 000. But fortunately, we obviously had a treating doctor because of his illness, and we had him on speed dial, right? So I ended up ringing him before the triple O. Caden was still alive at that moment, but he was obviously very distressed. But um, I think back to that and think, thank God I rang him first, because I honestly don't know how you process all of that in one moment. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and until he said it, and he said to me, and I still distinctly remember it saying, "Do not ring the ambulance because you'll end up with everybody there.
Yeah.
We can handle this." And then he was very respectfully. He said, "Hang up the phone and spend some time." And I remember that. And um, funny enough, I still don't recall it. I vaguely feel like it happened, but I just don't recall it. But he actually passed away in my arms. And like you said, it's a surreal moment. You don't know which way's up at that moment.
No.
And I remember when he passed away, we had a little dog, and the dog came up, sniffed him at the exact same moment, and licked his head, and then just sat next to
Yeah.
him. And even though it was such a emotional, terrifying moment, there's still that little part of beauty that happened that allows me to reflect on that one little moment with the dog.
Yeah.
Um, so to have police officers and protective services, and you've got a funeral director there that turned up for us about an hour afterwards. Um, you know, that,
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Yeah, no, definitely. And this is this is the whole point of this podcast, is to share experiences, and I think you guys have done a really good job so far on both talking about it, both on your episode, Topher, and obviously yourself now going through it, Michael, and your story. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was something earlier on. You said that you went through, or your partner wife went through, and it was Lauren, right?
Yeah.
Lauren. That Lauren had gone through, was it a dozen miscarriages? Is that
I think it was four all
okay?
up,
So
and then ectopic. So 4 or 5. Yeah. It's sort of yeah.
what did you do to get through that? I mean, that itself is very traumatic by itself. When that happened, and like what did you do every time it happened? How did you process it? How did you deal with it? Did you seek professional help? That sort of stuff. At
Well,
that time.
that's no that was the thing. I think that's we probably didn't do that well. Uh, you I don't think you realise how much you need to grieve a miscarriage,
Mm,
um, and I think sort of Lauren had to go through just not just the emotional part but the physical part as well,
yeah,
and then push herself to go back to work, etc., etc. And that's when we ended up under seeking some help from psychiatrist, and Lauren ended up having an admission
yeah,
after a miscarriage, because we'd actually fallen pregnant naturally, and we thought, aren't we clever, you know?
yeah,
And it got to a stage where we'd seen a heartbeat a couple of times, and then we went in to see our obstetrician again, and she said, "I'm so sorry, it's passed." And later on, we found out that there was some issues, chromosomal issues there. So from that on in, we sort of decided, well, we have to do full on IVF now, get the embryos tested, so at least we know if we're throwing something back in that if it miscarriages, it's because it does, because Lauren's body can't hold it, but at least it's not because we've put old eggs and old sperm together that don't really go that well. So with IVF, they can sort of put all the good stuff together the best they can, and then we get it sort of biopsied and tested. So yeah, so that's what we ended up doing. But yeah, the whole thing with the miscarriages is we didn't do that well. And in hindsight, we should have taken some time and looked after ourselves a bit better and our mental health, because each time it just went down. And Lauren had also, you know, they pump a woman's body full of hormones when you're doing fertility treatment. So there's the ups and downs and the ups and downs, and then you have this massive down of a miscarriage, or a chemical pregnancy that doesn't tag or whatever, and
yeah.
it's a lot of pressure, and Lauren does a high pressure job, so yeah, but yeah,
So,
so
so I guess this what you just said there might answer this as well, but I'll sort of
Yep.
I'll throw that again. How did you look after Lauren after every occasion? What was your role, and how did you do it with Lauren? Obviously, you've got that responsibility there, but more importantly, apart from the psychiatric help and the psychology help, who was supporting you, and did you have someone in that space where you could talk to help you just talk?
Um, Not so much. And I guess it's sort of one of those things you don't. I think this is still a very it's a very taboo subject, miscarriage, because again, people don't want to talk about it. People don't want to. They don't know what to say, etc., etc. I had a couple of good mates that I did talk to, and they supported us a lot along the way with all the IVF and all that. So, but yeah, we didn't really have a good setup there with support, either of us. So yeah, it was pretty difficult.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, but yeah, I guess with Lauren is sort of like there's only so much you can do. Um, you can do all the physical work around the house, but you can't do that much emotionally. You're a bit emotionally distraught yourself, and you don't really know what to do with your partner either to support. Her workplace was and still is very very supportive. My workplace wasn't that nice. I won't go into that today. That's a conversation we can have over a beer one day. But yeah, it was certainly yeah, they weren't very empathetic.
Yeah. No, that's what
It
I
doesn't help. It certainly doesn't. Yeah, it certainly doesn't help if you've got an employer that's not supporting you as well. I mean,
No,
and you've got a whole different coming in over the side
yeah,
as well. I mean, you're dealing with plenty
yeah,
already, and you don't need to deal with that. I mean, I was very fortunate with my employer. Very, very fortunate.
yeah,
I think going back to what you said though, Mike, about giving Lauren space and stuff like that. It's like you've got to be as close, but give them as far as. And sorry, I shouldn't say I know because I haven't experienced it. I'm only saying from mental health issues and anxiety and depression stuff that I've gone through, and also with Topher being there to support Topher. You've got to be as close as you can, but give them as much distance as they need. And doing the things like
yeah,
the housework and stuff like that might not seem that much, but it does make a big difference. All those little bits and pieces that you can do, and just I think for not so much longer, but females in general, just time to be able to adapt to it because it is very different. I think for a male and female, and that is because of what you said
yeah,
before, the physical attachment to it. There's big implications there. So I think that yeah, as I said, being as close as you can, but as far away to give them space and to be able to deal with their emotions is probably one of the smartest things. As long as they're seeking professional help or they want to get professional help, or when they do talk to you, they're getting the most out of it. They're not talking because they just want to talk to you, just to touch base, whatever. But to be able to try and start the process of recovering and talking.
yeah,
I think that's
yeah,
key. And that just doesn't go for um, grief or anything like that. I'm talking about mental health in general across the board.
yeah, absolutely.
One thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I was having some audio issues earlier, but you mentioned almost immediately you sought out to check yourself into a hospital. Um, was that because of your prior experience with managing your mental health that you thought, hey, let's get on top of this like day one, let's just jump straight in
Yes,
and give
that was
ourselves that support? I mean, that's quite self aware. I mean, I'm super impressed
Mm.
to hear that you made
yeah,
that.
that was a big part of it. That was a big part of it because we had both experienced being in the hospital before with mental health issues. So and it was sort of like, well, this is the worst thing that's ever going to happen to us, and we need some help immediately. And like when you go into the hospital, they have programs that they like you to do while you're there, and they said, no, you don't have to do that. You just have to You just have to tell us when you need something, and other than that, we're just going to give you space. So, which was absolutely incredible. When we first got in there, we couldn't get into a room together. Normally, they wouldn't put a man and a woman in a room together, but obviously, this is a special circumstances. So, after a couple of days, they got us a double room together. They had single beds, but they actually pushed the single beds together in one end of the room, and then put a little table at the other end of the room with chairs for us. So, which was just really nice, really thoughtful, you know. So, yeah, I think we were lucky. We had already, you know, had that connection, I suppose, with our mental health people, that we could just sort of rock up and say, hey, we really need you now more than ever, and they were really good, and they had no issue sort of admitting us, and it just really helped us get that space. So, and you know, and that, unfortunately, we were thinking about it afterwards. Wouldn't it be great to have a centre where you could have people that could just come in when something tragic like this happens, and there isn't any, and there's no funding for anything like that. But wouldn't that be fantastic? Because we were so lucky, we already had those previous connections that we could go, right, this is where we need to be right now. Let's go. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's just such an incredible message right there, because I can tell you now, I didn't have that headspace back then to even consider something
Yeah.
like that. And we couldn't bury Caden for near on 3 and a bit months, because we had an autopsy and a few other things. But even through that period, even though I was struggling with certain days, and I still never really occurred to me to seek anyone out.
Yeah.
I had my immediate network, and that's all I really stuck to.
That's because that's what
You
you're
know, the
used
other
to.
man was in there.
That's because that's what your world was, Topher. You know, like I think.
But it's such an important
100%,
message, though. That's
100%.
considered. You know?
Mike,
I know it may not be in the forefront of your mind, but it's so
yeah,
valuable.
no, Mike. Look, mate, through my past, and it's not about me in any way. I'm actually super impressed that one, you can talk about it openly, and you know that's the decision you made, and you're happy to do it.
Yeah.
I have suffered from chronic anxiety for the last 12 years, and that has led to me to hospital a couple of times. And I told Topher that I'd never talk about me going to hospital, but and I've told him that in my podcast and everything like that. It's something I wanted to keep private.
Yeah.
But hearing your story, I feel inspired to now say, hey, you know what? Yeah, hospital isn't the worst thing. If that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do. Now,
Yeah.
if anything like that happened to me, Mike, I would do the same thing. That's what I need to do. I need to get to hospital. It's probably the best place for me.
Yeah.
Just and with my experience in hospitals and seeing what I've seen in hospitals, I'm just so happy that they made it work for you and they did what they need to do to help you, because I know what those places are like, and some places aren't the best experiences. So
No, they're not, and that's. I mean, we were very lucky. We had private health insurance.
Yep.
It's a private hospital,
Yep.
so you know it's a different experience than going into a full on
Yep.
psychiatric
Ward,
sort of unit.
Yep.
Look, there's certainly people there that are quite ill.
Yep.
But there's a lot of people there that are there because of depression, anxiety, and you know, anxiety drives depression, which drives anxiety, which drives depression, and then the whole world caves in, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I'm really impressed, mate, that you're happy to share that. Topher, did you have any questions before we sort of change direction a little bit?
No, I was probably going to ask moving in a different direction
Okay.
myself.
You go,
So,
mate. You go. Go for it.
I wanted to start changing towards a little faith. You've got another daughter
Yes.
now. So this hasn't stopped you from wanting to have more children and being able to offer that parentship to another child. So tell us about Faith and how you got to that point.
All right. Well, Faith is a little terror. She's almost 17 months. In a couple of days, she's 17 months.
But you wouldn't change it for the world.
She was same as Hope. She's an IVF baby. She's very out there. She's very social. She's a great kid, and she's just moving along in leaps and bounds. We had a bit of a scare when she came into the world. Lauren, so for both her pregnancies, she had gestational diabetes. She had preeclampsia, um, and I thought there was a third thing, but I can't quite remember what that was now. But anyway, the Faith came along very in a big hurry. She was a booked cesarean, and 10 days earlier, Lauren woke up on a Monday morning, 11th of October. She'd gone upstairs. I was downstairs still in bed, asleep, and she screamed, and I could hear her downstairs and said, "Mike, you need to get up here. I'm bleeding." I said, "Okay." So I came up and I looked. She was sitting on the couch and looked in the bathroom and went, "Yep, you're bleeding," and it's it's not spotting. This is like, let's get the ambulance here now. So her placenta had abrupted, so we were rushed off to hospital, and within sort of 45, 47 minutes of getting into the hospital, we had a little baby in her arms. So she came along a little bit earlier, not quite what we planned. So she was a little bit sort of off the first couple of days, but since then she's just come along in leaps and bounds. What's the word? Leaps and bounces? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Geez, sorry, Mike, that journey to the hospital would have felt like an eternity as well, I'd imagine.
Well,
Your heart would have been
it
racing.
did, because I rang AAA and they said, "All right, so what we need to get, you need to get some hot towels." And I said, "Why?" Because your wife's obviously giving birth. I said, "No, she's not giving birth. She's 4 weeks early. The baby's not engaged. It's all right." And then she said, the ambulance are coming under lights and sirens, but they didn't. They came at about 55 kilometres an hour, and it took them about 25 minutes. And then they got there, and they stuffed around trying to put a cannula in, and I'm an ex-nurse, and I wanted to say, "Just give me that and let me put it in." And I said, in the end, I said, "Okay, I think we're going to go. We're sitting in the back of the ambulance. Let's go." And I was almost about to jump in the driver's seat and say, "Look, just show me where the lights and sirens are. I'll clear these red lights," because we stopped at every light and was like, "Oh my God, this is taking so long." We got to the Marta, and we came through the doors, and there was three midwives standing there going, "What's taking you so long?" And I just looked at the driver and I said it was him. But as soon as we got there, they put the monitors on. We heard a heartbeat and we went, "Okay, she's all right." We know. So yeah. So it was another traumatic day, and we had a bit of PTSD about it now and again, because it was just all those, you go through all those things that what could have gone wrong. But yeah, she's as cute as cucumber. She really is. She just loves life. She loves going to daycare, loves jumping in the pool. She's just very
Walking?
happy.
Did you say 17 months? Is she walking?
She's a bit slow. She took 12 months and 4 days to crawl, and then when did she start walking? Not that long ago, but now she's like almost running. So
Yeah,
she's,
right.
And she's a big kid. She's always been like tall, and she's a good eater. So
Yeah, that's good.
yeah, we had she slept really well until she was 12 months, and then she decided not to sleep through the night. So we've just recently we've been to sleep school up here, which is fantastic, because it just cured her. So now she's sleeping 12 hours at night. She's off her bottles, and she's just eating solids. So yeah, and she's very happy. We're all happy. We're sleeping. We're not no longer fatigued.
Maybe I need the number for that.
Yeah.
My 4-year-old's not sleeping very well. Maybe I need that number.
I feel mine are a bit older. Mine are 6 and 4, so mine are sort of through that, and they sleep really well. So I actually, touch wood, I get good sleep because they sleep overnight quite well.
Yeah, good. So much nicer.
Yeah, oh mate. It gives you time to do things for yourself as well. It lets you focus on other areas. Like for us, this podcast. I mean, this whole thing takes up a bit of time. We're across a couple other platforms, so it just gives you a bit of time back. So we've got 17-month-old Faith. How do you talk to Faith about hope? And do you distill that memory in, or is it something you plan on doing later on down the track?
We do. I mean, she hasn't got too many words yet, but
Yep.
we do, and we've got pictures up around the place of Hope.
Yep.
So we're always going to tell her about her big sister.
Yep.
We're pretty certain that she can see her now and again. She buzzes
Yeah.
around. So
Yeah.
we're certainly we're both spiritual people. So there's
Yep.
certainly times that we feel hope around us, and
Yep.
sometimes she just sort of sits there and looks up with nothing on the ceiling and smiling and clapping. We think, oh, okay,
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
here. So
Yeah.
so I'm sure they have a little chat now and again. So
That's
we'll
awesome.
absolutely be talking to her about her, and
That's
so
awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, I guess coming like doing a full circle. How did? I'm sorry, Toph, unless you had any other questions. What?
You're good, mate.
How'd you find Red Nose? I mean, how did you come across them? How have they helped you? What sort of got you on that path?
I think I've always known about red nose. It was like red nose when I was, I suppose, late teens, early 20s. It was very big. I actually had a teacher at school when I was grade 9 that lost a child to SIDS, cot death we called it back then. So
Yeah.
it's always sort of been on my radar. I think Lauren is the one that reached out to Red Nose to start with. Whilst we were in Belmont, so and they were just super helpful, and I think we both decided that to help us in our journey, we wanted to be able to give back and be able to talk to people. So Lauren has been on the phones before. I did my training to do it, but I sort of wasn't quite there. So we'll go back and retrain and do it. Lauren hasn't been on the phone since Faith came along, just because she's bloody hard work, and but she does do a call, I think, once a month. There's a group that she's on that she leads on a Tuesday night. So yeah.
So what was the process? So you got in touch with Red Nose. What sort of happened from there? It was 1-to-1 counselling, was it? Was that the first step? What was the process there?
It was basically just talking to the phone on the phone to them what happened, and basically just to tell us that they were there to support us. They had support groups, all that sort of thing. I mean, we were in Belmont then when we spoke to them and said, look, we are really well set up here, but we'll absolutely be in touch and so forth down the track. So we formed a very quick bond with Red Nose.
Yeah, look, Chris, I can vouch for that, mate. I actually can't recall how I got in touch with them. I feel like I reached out to them about something, but about volunteering, I think. But everyone I've spoken to there has been super helpful. They help put you in touch with the right contacts. And as you know, mate, as we've been putting this together, they've been very supportive of what we're trying to do as well. So probably can't say anything bad about them anyway. But
No, it's hard to find something bad to say about them.
Yeah.
It's sort of like if you say, "Hey, I've got an idea," they go, "Oh, yeah, we can run with that." Yeah. So recently, because I'm on obviously the Facebook pages, and there was a bloke locally that said, also a father who'd lost. So, and he said, "Look, I want to try and get a bunch of guys together and start up a touch footy team, social." So there's 8 of us that are sort of within a few kilometres of each other, and we've discovered that the touch is good, but a beer once a month at a pub is really good too, because we can sit there and talk openly, and this is and that's we don't call it a support group, but our team's called the Red Nose Dads. So and we've all lost in different ways, but we all share that story. So that's a really great thing, and Red Nose got behind it straight away and said, yeah, absolutely, and they've sort of keep sending out reminders to people that we're old and we only have 8 players and we really need probably 16.
Maybe Faith in the jersey for Lightning. We might have to get her in the team, mate. No, but look, I didn't know what to expect coming into this podcast. I really didn't. I know that it's a very traumatic event. It's something that I haven't gone through personally, but I know for the both of you here, it is such a traumatic event, such a turn in life, and I'm just blown away. And I'm not saying this just because you're here, Mike, but I am blown away by the way you've sought help straight after it happened, for you to identify that's where you need to go. That's the best place for you. Um, that you've come through. You'll never get over it, but you've come through, and now you have faith to make sure that she upholds the little sister role. And over the years, I'm sure, speaking with Topher, there's certain dates and stuff like that that you'll remember. But I think, the way that you've handled it, and the way that you've come across today is very it's a humbling experience for myself. And I just can't thank you enough for your honesty and your truth with everything that's happened. So.
Yeah, and I say the same, Mike. I really appreciate you coming on. I know I said that earlier, but it's incredibly valuable that we share our stories. And the touch footy team and everything. That's all great, and that's all stuff we fully support and think is so valuable as well. Because while we can talk to people, having a conversation with someone that's had a lived experiences um, resonates much easier.
Yeah.
I just want to repeat what Chris had said, Mike, and thank you for jumping on and sharing your story. And I know I've said that a couple of times already, but it's so important that we, as men, open up and share our stories, and even the traumatic ones and the difficult conversations, and we talk about it, so that this stigma of trying to be stoic and strong can be reduced a little bit. Because while that's to some degree a generational thing, the world is changing. Men need to vent and talk and scream as well, cry even.
Yeah.
And with crying is such an important part. And I don't know if you have, but I certainly have.
Oh, mate, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. 9.5 years later, it's
baller.
something will get me every now and then.
Lauren will tell you I'm the cry of the family.
But it's so important, and I know we touched on it on one of our other podcasts, but the chemicals it releases, it actually helps you process that. So, the fact that you've joined a touch footy team, while through my experience, I found that talking to friends and family was great, really supportive, but they never fully, truly understood what I was going through. So having that connection with other blokes that have been through it, that connection to be able to say, hey, I didn't go through your experience, but I went through a experience that I understand. It's so valuable to be able to be accepted in your journey and your story. And I commend you for starting that.
Yeah. And I can tell you with this team, like, I think there was a couple of blokes that knew each other sort of loosely and met up together. But, we all met at a local pub a few weeks ago before we strapped on boots, which is part of it. It's all about getting together. And, we all agreed that was the best therapy session we've had, because we could actually sit there and talk very openly and honestly. Even there's guys there that said, look, I haven't said this to my wife because I don't want them to be upset, but things that are being said to them and so forth. And, it was sort of like there's stuff you can get off your shoulders with other blokes, and it's a safe space, and I think it's a really good thing to be able to open up and talk to other guys. And as you say, men's mental health. I mean, we've got to look. You can only look at the statistics. Men are much more likely to do themselves in. And it's really important to look after your mental health.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're all talking about. Is 3 out of 4 men take that choice, and we've got to break it down. We've got to get men talking, and without going over it in detail again, thank you. I hope we talk again in the future. It's wonderful to speak with you and be connected with you and hear Hope's story and Faith's new journey and being the little sister. And mate, I can tell you, I've got 2 boys now that both know about Caden, and my older one, he actually refers to him a lot. it's wonderful to make sure that name is being said constantly, and a recognition that this little life existed, and
Absolutely.
that's what Say This Name Day is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
No worries. Thanks.
No,
thanks so
thank
much for
you.
having
Thank
me.
you.
Be a better